Today we're going to talk all about synthesizers, strings, pianos, bass, leads, when to use them in stereo, when to use them in mono, and why they do and don't work in a track.
True Sound Studios is in your ears.
Hey guys, what is up? I am Weezna. As always, we are here at my studio, True Sound Studios, and today we're going to talk about synths and pianos and stereo width, using things in stereo versus mono, like how it all fits together and why it works and why it doesn't work in tracks. So this is a topic I've been wanting to cover for a while. Often with my local clients and people who send me tracks, I get sent these pre-mixed beats. Now, for the most part, the beats actually always sound really good. I mean, I'm very impressed with these bedroom producers and their mix level, and everything sounds actually really good. I'm usually very impressed with the beats. The problem is, if those beats were never going to have vocals on them, I would say they're done. They could end up on TV commercials and in movies. But the problem I keep running into is that so many of these producers put almost everything, if sometimes everything, down the center. There's no stereo width. There's no room for vocals. In my opinion, that main vocal should always be down the center, and then everything else should be spread around it, accompanying it and making it sound even bigger. So this video is not only for producers, but it's also for singer-songwriters, recording engineers, and really I think this is a really good way to think about the long term, like where the track is gonna go after you're done producing it. So I put together a track where I got some really wide stereo chords. I mix in a lead. It changes octaves when I know the vocal's gonna come in. How I put together verses compared to the choruses by just stripping things away, and most importantly, leaving room in the mix for the vocal. We have to think about all the other things that are gonna happen with our track. Is there gonna be a vocalist put on it? Is somebody gonna rap on it? Is somebody gonna sing? What's gonna happen in the mixing process? What's gonna happen in the mastering process? When you are creating a beat, we need to think about all of that stuff, because there are things that you might be doing that you're not even knowing you're doing that are creating problems when it's coming to tracking or maybe even mixing and mastering the entire song. So I'm gonna show you guys audio examples of how to put together a beat that's really conducive and is really great for a vocalist. And not only that, but is also really good for the mixing and mastering process. So not only do I produce music, I mix and master music, but I'm also a songwriter. I write full songs from beginning to end, and I actually work with singers and we write vocals and vocal melodies and put full songs together. Because I'm involved in essentially the entire process, these are some of the things that I would love to pass on to you guys who are starting out producing music and just need some help and need some advice so you can make your tracks even more friendly to vocalists, and also so that songs turn out better in the mixing and mastering process. Okay guys, let's get into it. Okay guys, let's just take a listen to the track first before we go ahead and tear it apart.
Give me the beat, boy, I'm free in my soul. I wanna get lost in your rock and roll and drift away, and drift away, and now we just a beat up.
Okay, so you guys get an idea what it is. That vocal I threw over there at the top, it reminded me of that song so much. This is just a track I came up with real quick, really just to kind of show you guys my mentality and how I put together tracks and why I think things work together, not only when I'm producing them, but also when we start adding vocals on top of it. We get into mixing and mastering. It really works out good. Obviously, this is years of mixing and producing, and the things that we have issues with and the things that work out really great. These are kind of like a culmination of all those things. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and first just mute all these vocals. We don't care about that. We're not gonna care about the lead right now. And I'm also gonna get rid of the bass. So right now we are just gonna take a listen to just the chords and the drums. Okay, so how I put together a track is I first always start out with the chords. Now the chords is kind of like the basis of a track. Now, not always, I mean, there's so many different ways to write a track, but in most cases, I start out with chords, and that is going to be super wide as I can make these chords. So if we pull this up on the screen here, as you can see, these are the chords. You guys are more than welcome to go ahead and use these. So we have 3 chords. The 3rd chord repeats for the 4th chord to give us our 4-bar measure. And so these are super wide. So if we listen to just the chords, so that's in stereo. Now I'm going to put it in mono. Take a listen to mono. So the reason why, my whole mentality behind this is we're going to put vocals on top of this. So anything that is down the center is essentially going to fight with our vocal. Now, typically we put kick drum, snare drum, bass guitar down the center of the track. That's kind of like industry standard stuff. That is generally what is put down the center of a mix. So everything else needs to work around that. Now, why kick drum, snare drum, and bass don't really interfere with vocals is because they're in different octaves in the frequency spectrum. So the thing that probably gets closest to the vocal is the snare drum, but because kick drum is really low frequencies, bass is really low frequencies, the snare or the clap or whatever you decide to use is really the only thing that's going to fight a vocal. And for the most part, because it's percussive and it happens real quick, it generally doesn't affect the vocal. So with our chords, our like substance, our meat and potatoes of the track, this we want to be really wide, and essentially this is really gonna like fill up the space. So what I was just playing you was the chorus, and when it breaks down, that's the verse. And all we have is a kick, a snare, and just those chords. So even with just a kick, a snare, and those chords, the track sounds full. Now, how you make that sound like something has happened, like now it's a change of a part of the song. All of a sudden we went from the big chorus and now we strip a lot of it away to get to the verse. So as you can see here, I just pretty much rolled off a whole bunch of the high end. So once again, that is in stereo, okay? So for me, it's the chords are super wide. Now, depending on what synth tone you use, that really, that is up to you guys. Try to spread those as wide as possible because now we have kick drum and snare drum down the center, and now we have our chords that are super wide, and that is starting to fill up our space in our track. Okay, so let's get to the next thing, the bass. So now we're gonna add in bass. Now, because bass is so low, it's super low, even if you add a bunch of mid and highs to it, for the most part, the bass is a low frequency instrument. And that is another thing to have down the center. Now, of course, you can make it stereo. This is not in every situation. But for the most part, if you keep the bass down the center, what ends up happening is your kick drum and the bass have less opportunity to have phase problems, meaning something happening in the left and the right slightly out of phase and creating some really unintentional low-end problems. It's a reason for things not being mixed correctly in that low frequency spectrum. So if we keep the bass down the center and the kick drum down the center, you will find that when it comes to mixing, things just sit into the mix much better. So let's just take a listen to just the bass and the drums. Okay, so that bass is once again in mono. Now, this bass, because it is a synth bass, and often these synth manufacturers like to make everything in stereo, so everything just sounds super wide, and it's really up to you guys to decide when it's supposed to be stereo and when it's supposed to be mono. So for me, in almost every case, the bass is mono. It is directly down the center, and I'm not thinking about what's happening left and right, because in my eyes and how I write tracks, the bass is down the center. So if we play all three of these together right now, so that track is essentially done. We don't even need to put a lead on it, because essentially your vocal is the lead. But in my case, I mean, I know a lot of people like the track just like this, and that is enough for them. I really like those leads, and they can become a mixing thing to have to deal with later on after you add the vocal in there. For the most part, I always put a lead in the hook, in the chorus, also in the pre-chorus, and sometimes in the verse if it's really minimal. So in this case, I know I'm going to put vocals on it. So right now I have it mixed in the center, but I have a ton of reverb on it, which kind of makes it sound like it's back in the distance. It's not really up in your face. I want the vocal to be up in the face, and I want my lead, even though it's down the center, to sound like it's further behind. It's behind the vocal. Let's take a listen to just the lead for the chorus. So once again, the leads. Now, in most cases, I use a mono lead because I want to have that lead be mono. I want to have the opportunity, if I need to put it all the way to the left or partially to the left or mostly to the right, I don't have to worry about when I pan it all the way to the left, I lost all the right end information, and then vice versa. So I think in mono it works out really nicely, and then you can add some stereo effects like reverb and delay in stereo to kind of make it sound wider if you need it. In this case, I chose to add some reverb, some long reverb, to really be able to make the lead sound just bigger. So let's play all of this together. Okay, so let's say in theory, we know that the vocalist is not going to do harmonies. They are not going to do backups. They're pretty much just going to sing, and that's it. So maybe it works having this lead go right down the center. But maybe there's a ton of harmonies and backups and delay vocals and all things all over the place. Now we might have to rethink where this lead goes. Maybe it should go all the way left, or maybe all the way right, because we're going to put a harmony on the other side of it. And always try to balance this out. Try to make it always nice and even, so it never sounds like one side is louder in the mix than the other. So what we could do is potentially take our lead and just start panning it to the left. So what I did right there is I'm panning the lead to the left, but I'm panning the reverb to the right. And it's just to help kind of try to even things out a little bit. Now in this song, I don't really necessarily know that it needs to be panned to the left. It will work. So before I get any further into it, let's just unmute the vocals and see what it sounds like.
Give me the beat, boy, free in my soul. I wanna get lost in your rock and roll and drift away, and drift away. And now it's just a beat up. Give me the beat, boy, free in my soul. I wanna get.
Okay, so I'm going to stop it right there. So if we listen to the drums, when it kind of like comes in the second half of that, see, we got the hi-hat is panned off to the left. So it would be a good idea then to try to balance it out a little bit by taking the lead and panning that all the way to the right now. So let's take a listen to this.
Drift away, and drift away. And now it's just a beat up. Give me the beat, boy, free in my soul. I wanna get lost in your rock and roll and drift away, and drift away, and drift away. And now it's just a beat up.
So this is kind of like balancing the mix. This is kind of like thinking ahead on what is going to happen with my track. What is the intention that I'm writing this track for? I'm writing it to put a vocal on there. So if I got the hi-hat to the left, that's the only thing that's kind of being in stereo right now. I'll put the lead to the right, and now we've created some balance in our mix. So with the vocal here, if we take a listen, I have a vocal down the center, and then it goes stereo, and then it goes back center again.
Roll and drift away, and drift away, and drift away. And now he turns the beat up. Give me the people.
So that's another thing you can do that's small, when it comes to mixing with vocals, that helps make that lead kind of pull that whole lead together, because now we have our vocals all the way down the center the whole time. So maybe it's going to get a little boring. So we break it up by putting something back in stereo to then bring it back in mono. That's just a little ear candy, little things that are fun to listen to. So you guys can use this technique on, not just hip hop. You can use it on EDM, pop. I mean, really, any song works like this. This is just kind of like the core of building a track. Using these 4 elements, you got your drums, your bass, your chords or your substance, and then a lead. That is a really great track. It's not over complex. It's simple enough, and it leaves a lot of space for vocals. So guys, I hope this video helped you guys out. I know this is a lot to take in. So if you guys have any more suggestions for video ideas, or maybe you guys have some really specific questions you want to ask me, feel free to leave a comment under this video, or go ahead and just email True Sound Studios. All right, guys, I hope this helps you guys make some better beats. So if you guys like this video, consider subscribing and hit that like button. Follow us on Instagram for daily posts. You can find the beats that I make right here at the studio on our SoundCloud page. True Sound Studios also mixes and masters your tracks. So once again, guys, thanks for watching this video. I'm Weezna, we're at True Sound Studios, and True Sound Studios is in your ears.